Have you ever wondered why something as universal as menopause, a transition that every woman will experience, remains such a silent topic? Why do millions of women face this life stage feeling isolated, underprepared, and unheard? Well, my guest today, filmmaker and menopause advocate Denise Pines, is spearheading a movement to shred the silence of menopause. Welcome to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to inspiring midlife women to feel more connected to their bodies, pleasure, and power through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health and sexuality coach, and it is my pleasure to be here with you. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Denise Pines, a true trailblazer in the field of women's health. Denise is an age empowerment advocate and a passionate leader in midlife wellness. She's worn many hats: award-winning filmmaker, health tech innovator, and the driving force behind Wise Pause Wellness. Today, we'll be diving into her latest project, The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause. This powerful documentary is set to educate and empower the 1.1 billion women expected to reach menopause by 2025. The film, featuring renowned doctors and women sharing their real life experiences, shines a spotlight on the health risks, societal stigmas, and workplace challenges women face during menopause. It's premiering on PBS this October, and it's a conversation we all need to hear. Let's welcome Denise Pines to the show. Welcome, Denise.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you on here on the show to talk about the groundbreaking documentary, The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause, which is premiering on October 17th, the day before World Menopause Day. And I can just feel the energy, the excitement, the anticipation. It's all over the airwaves around this powerful body of work that you've been a part of, along with your co-producers, journalist Tamsin Fadal and Joanne Lamarca Matheson. Before we talk about the film, I would love our listeners to learn a little bit more about you. You have such a fascinating and diverse career track record. I know when I had the pleasure of meeting you in person, and we talked a little bit about this before we jumped on, was, wow, how does she do all of those things? Can you share a little bit about your story and explain how you landed in this moment of producing a documentary about a topic that impacts half the world's population?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the entertainment business for a long time, producing television shows, radio programs, and documentaries. But I also had this other hat that sometimes people didn't know about. I would always, depending on where I was, you got to know that one side that you knew me on. So if I was in entertainment environments, you only knew about entertainment. But if I was in the health space, right, you just knew about the health things I did, but you really didn't know that I was in entertainment. So the health part of what I do is I am currently the president of the Osteopathic Medical Board in California. I'm past president of the Medical Board of California. I sit on the Federation of All State Medical Boards. I sit on a hospital board. I sit on the admission committee for a medical school. And so I have this huge regulatory healthcare hat that I've been wearing for about 14 years. So a lot of my more recent films, including this one, but my last one as well, I really understand the healthcare aspect and why a lot of times that we are where we are from a health system perspective, right? Because I work with hospitals, I know the future doctors coming into the healthcare system, and then I'm part of the regulation process. So I know as regulators how we view and how we go about making regulations and legislation and decision making. So, I have these opportunities every once in a while, like with the M Factor, to merge it together, right? To merge my health with my entertainment. Not all my films work like that. I did a film on education, and health had nothing to do with that really, other than mental health, right? So that's kind of my universe. And I have my own tea company where we do teas for menopause.
Right here,
Yes.
brain fog and the hot flash tea. I love the brain fog tea. It has that incredible ingredient, GABA, which really lights up the receptors in my brain.
Isn't it? Totally. I mean, I drink my tea almost every day. for that exact same reason, because I, in fact, do a lot of things. And sometimes I sit down at my desk and go, I feel like a bit overwhelmed, like I know a lot of people do, and go, what am I supposed to be working on? And then I go, I need some tea. And I'll go get the tea and bam, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And I just start going at it. But it's funny. I think I don't need the tea. And then I sit at my desk and I go, I do need the tea.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. So, yeah, I love that you exist in this intersection of entrepreneurship, health, education, empowerment. And yeah, filmmaking was your special gift and talent that I didn't know about until I met you the last time we were together and here in Austin, Texas. So let's dive into it, right? M Factor. It dives into this topic that's been shrouded in silence for too long, menopause. And we're going to say menopause a lot on this show. We're going to be loud and proud about menopause. What inspired you and your fellow producers to make the film, and why now? Why do you think now is the right time to bring this issue into the spotlight through this film?
It's interesting. I really wanted to do this film 4 years ago. And so we already had a treatment put together. And I went to a couple of, distributors, streamers, who I will not say names, 4 years ago. But they said, who's going to watch that? Who wants to watch a film about menopause? And who wants to watch a whole hour of that? Nobody wants to watch that. Get out of here with that, Denise. Come, what else do you have for me? Right? I mean, this was just 4 years ago. This was where everything was. And even when we think 4 years ago, we were still shrouded in silence. There were a lot of people trying to break through that, but we did not have the breakthrough until really about 2 years ago now. And that was when we started seeing, to me, we started seeing a series of articles come out from the New York Times. And that started opening up people to start having conversations. Social media, there had been some social media platforms that had been talking about menopause for a while, right? Some of them have big followings, some have very small followings. But a lot of that was around, bantering and sort of complaining about symptoms, but it wasn't getting into the solution solve of what we needed to do. And a lot of people were kind of giving each other kind of wrong information. And so we started to see more of these articles. Then we started to see doctors actually come onto platforms and start talking about menopause. And then we got, our menopause advocates, like my partner in this film, Tamsin, who has started to amplify this. We started to see celebrities come, basically admit that they were there and also admit that they were actually having experiences that was causing them to feel like all the other women were feeling, but they were keeping silent about it, right? So I think it just became a convergence of all of these things sort of happening, right? And so the time was right. I went back to PBS, who was not the one who told me who was going to watch it. It's just someone who I had a relationship with. And I said, I think the time is now. And they're like, okay, Denise, I think you may have convinced me, right? And so here we are with a film that is coming out on October 17th.
Yeah, I mean, menopause is definitely having its moment, as the headlines read. But, strangely enough, when you step outside the menopause bubble that we
Yes.
exist in, I have conversations with women, and there's still so much silence
Yep.
and shame and misinformation and just not knowing about this very important life stage. And so I think, wow, now is a better time than ever. It's so necessary to reach beyond the celebrities and the
Yep.
influencers and the
Yep.
amazing doctors who are educating, and beyond social media channels. And I know that's what you're trying to do with this film. Just step
Yep.
outside that bubble and really amplify
Yep.
the conversation, which is so, so important.
Yep.
You mentioned you have, background in filmmaking, and especially, I didn't know about this. You're a Peabody Award-winning filmmaker. How did your previous experiences shape your approach to producing this documentary in particular?
So this is now my 13th documentary. And so I'm not new to filmmaking or storytelling or doing films, obviously, that make a significant impact. But what's different about this is the first film I've done that impacts me directly. My last film I did was about the Black maternal health crisis. I do not have children. And I do not have any family member who had any adverse complications as a result of being pregnant or, postpartum. So it wasn't a personal story, but it was a story that I was compelled to tell because I just was shocked at the statistics. This is a story where I know all the areas, right? I knew exactly everything we needed to touch on. I already had the research because I've been in this sort of space for the last 7 or 8 years. I understood the issue deeply. I do events, so I talk to women all the time. I know how they feel insecure about this, how they feel shameful at some point, how they feel like nobody's hearing or seeing or listening to them. I know the doctors who are out there helping women. I have their data, what little data we do have in this space. So it just, it felt like this was a lot easier to do, but hard at the same time because it's like, how do we tell a story where we're not whining? Right? Where, all of a sudden you want to turn off because it's like, oh, here's another woman complaining about menopause. But how do we make this interesting? How do we make it compelling? How do we add some humor into it? How do we make you stay through an hour all the way to the end, feeling very compelled? And then how do we end with you wanting to do something, improve if you're a physician, improve your knowledge base. If you're a woman, seek help. If you're a family member, support. How do we do that in a film? And I think we did it.
Yeah, I've seen the trailer. I've caught a glimpse. It's
Yeah,
powerful, right?
yeah,
And many the stories that are being told in the film, they're by everyday people. I know you have, more celebrity types in the film are also telling their stories. They reveal the mental and physical challenges they face daily. And it's not all hot flashes,
yeah,
right?
no.
They're talking about real pain points that we don't talk about. How did you ensure that their stories were told with the depth and sensitivity they deserve and not sort of this whining that you didn't want to convey, that it wasn't about complaining about symptoms?
I think it's really just really as a filmmaker, when you're doing documentaries in particular, is really being sensitive to the issue, knowing what all the issues are, recognizing that people may have breakdown moments and allowing them to have those moments, letting them completely express themselves, not interfering. You may come back, they may say something and they don't finish it. You may have to come back to it, but really letting them tell that story the way they want to tell that story. For me as a filmmaker, it's up to me to edit that story around, but for them to be able to share it. And also to let them know that, hey, if you told something just now that you didn't want to tell us, we are happy not to include it. If you decide you don't want to be included at all in the film, let us know. We will not include you. And that has happened in a couple of the films that I have done. And it is tough as a filmmaker to have expense to go out to capture someone's story and then to have them say, no, I don't want to be in it. Right. But we have to respect the boundary of that. So it definitely, I think we are just sensitive to this. I think most of the women who were part of the production, and of course, we had some men who were behind the scenes, some of the camera people, but mostly it was women. So they're already, if they were younger, they may know their mom or an aunt or a grandmother who have had this experience. And they also are curious for themselves. So they are sensitive. So I just think we just had an environment that made it very safe for these women to tell their stories.
And that storytelling right now, especially around this topic that has been silenced, as we said, right, is so, so important. I feel there's this collective unsilencing, unmuting of our stories. And,
Yeah.
you know, I don't think that we're complaining. I mean, I think we're naming physical symptoms, but
Yeah.
from what I've seen of the clip, they're naming the physical symptoms, but
Yes.
they're also talking about the deep psycho-emotional impact that these symptoms have. And we know that menopause doesn't only impact us,
Yeah.
it impacts everyone around us, right? Our
Exactly.
loved ones, our partners, our colleagues, our coworkers, our neighbors, right?
Right.
It impacts everyone around us. And so I think those stories are so, so important. So we
Yeah.
feel less alone. So thank
Exactly.
you so much for that. I know the film addresses the disparities faced by Black and Brown women in menopause,
Yeah.
something else that is not on the radar. Can you share why it was important to highlight these disparities and how the film hopes to bring about change in this area?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's never a film that I do where I don't sort of interject self. I'm a woman, I'm a Black woman living in America. And there's just experiences that have come with that intersect every part of who I am and how I go about the world. And so with this film, knowing that women of color are typically left out of this menopause conversation, this has been more of a white woman rallying call.
Mhm.
And when you look at even all the books that are coming out, they're still just from one perspective. And that means then that we're not understanding what happens to other women during this phase. And I wanted to make sure that all women were included, right? So Black women, brown women. We have Dr. Wen Shin, who is an Asian physician who brings like this, really sensitive continuity to her work as a physician. And she shares that in the film in a very unique way. And there's something that she's the only person, she's beginning to have it mimic around the country, but she's at John Hopkins. She's the only woman doing what she's doing. And she's an Asian doctor. It's just amazing and fabulous that is kind of in her world. A lot of people know about her in the healthcare world, but not sort of outside like some of the other physicians. So I just wanted to make sure that we understood that no matter the social economic status really of Black women and brown women, that are still treated differently when it comes inside of the healthcare system. And this is just a fact, right? And so I wanted to just really make sure that we looked at and understood through their lens how they are experiencing menopause from a culture standpoint, and what are they doing or looking to do to sort of help manage that process, as they have this journey from perimenopause into menopause. So I just think that it was just really important to cover that in the film.
Mm. Yeah, we've covered that topic here on the podcast with Dr. Samina Rahman. I don't know if you know her as Gyno Girl. She addressed this topic of the cultural disparities
Yeah.
of menopause amongst, different communities and really spoke to this topic called allostatic load. The,
Mm,
the way that stress builds over
yes.
time in our bodies. And this is especially pertinent to Black women, given history around racism.
Yeah.
How do you address this very sensitive topic in the film?
So that's interesting. There's another term for that, more broader term. That's more of a medical term, but a broader term that we have is called weathering. And so when we think of the weather, if you live in a place where they get a lot of rain, over time that rain that starts to just simply deteriorates the structure of, say, a home, right? So that's the same thing that happens with the woman's body. And so when we look at the circumstances of, Black women and sort of that weathering that they have as they are going through school, and maybe they've had some challenges in school, they were picked on through, teachers, things like that. They may have been suspended for something they didn't do. And the weathering starts to begin even that early. And then you kind of enter into going to college. Maybe you have some incidences there, further weathering. You get into the workforce, you encounter, oh, I didn't get that promotion. I was much more qualified than the people that they chose. Further weathering, right? And so then you get weathering just from having children. Like that's such an intense activity. We don't really even recognize what carrying another human inside of our body is. I read once that a pregnant woman carrying a baby every day is like her doing a marathon, right? And it
Mhm.
just really made me think about how we minimize pregnancy for women. Like, oh, women get pregnant and have babies, da 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 da. But women who actually have babies and are pregnant know what it's like They know what that's like,
Mhm.
right? That is not a simple task. So that weathering, and then you go into up the ultimate hormonal disruption time in a woman's life. And then that Black woman is depleted. She's depleted. So her experience in menopause, her perimenopausal experience are like off the charts, right? Which is why we see Black women and Latino women suffering more severely with symptoms, suffering longer with symptoms. And then, they also, when they show up in healthcare, they are not listened to. So a
Mm.
lot of them come in with these symptoms and go out with no solutions,
Hmm.
right? Go in, come out with nothing. And this can go on for years. And finally, they get to a point where they're relegated to suffering. I meet so many Black women and Latino women who just suffer through menopause, and it's ridiculous. And these are women who have means. I'm not even talking about women who don't have means, right? These are women who can go to specialists and just based on how they've been treated, relegate themselves to just, I'll just suffer through this.
Yeah, I heard that my mother say that so many times. You just have to suffer and get through it, Gabrielle. I heard it so much growing up. Well, I
So
heard it when
much,
once I
right?
became a mother, and I would, go to her and air my grievances. Gabriella, that's how it is. You just have to suck it up and carry on. And it is embedded in our cultures. And I feel that what is most unfortunate about this is that, the longer we experience symptoms of menopause, particularly hot flashes, we know, right, that the longer you experience symptoms such as hot flashes, the greater your chances of developing metabolic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, obesity, which is what we're seeing in high numbers in these communities. So where are we going to, you know,
Dementia
put an end
and
to it?
dementia and Alzheimer's.
Dementia and Alzheimer's too. Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Um,
seeing it as not only the immediate symptoms, but the long-term consequences of that suffering.
which
Um,
is why I think we talk about HRT in this film, but we also talk about lifestyle, right? We talk about the right kinds of foods. We talk about nutritional supplements as well. We talk about exercise. We talk about alcohol. At this age, women really love their alcohol. They love their, oh my God, after a long days of work, I've got to have my wine. Well, that wine doesn't serve us at this point. It actually is a major, major disruptor. We don't go into details, but you'll see a number of physicians will talk about that. It is that point where we grieve the old self. And I think no one said it's okay to grieve the old self. It's okay to grieve the self before perimenopause.
mm,
Right? The time in your life where you didn't have a hot flash, or the time in your life where you weren't fatigued, the time in your life where you weren't dry, the time in your life where your libido hasn't decreased. Like we haven't been told it's okay to grieve that so that we can then just move on to what we actually really need to down do. Right. So now I need to eat foods that are much more nutrient to my body because my body's cells are older and it doesn't absorb whatever I'm putting in at the same level it did when I was younger. So if I put junk in, my cellular structure, which adds to these, sort of conditions you just talked about, increases the intensity of those conditions. So I think like there's so much education that we need to have around this time frame. There's so much research that we need to have done. There is some research that's being done to see if when you have a hot flash, it's so fractional and minute, but you actually lose oxygen. When you lose oxygen, you lose the oxygen that's going to your brain. And so it's now looking at, oh my God, women who suffer, say, 10 years with hot flashes, and you think about the oxygen loss that they've had. Is this the reason why some women come out on the other side with almost permanent brain fog? Or
mm.
that leads to early dementia, or that leads to Alzheimer's. There's been such a lack of research in women's health, period, right? I mean, just, perimenopause, PMS, endometriosis, PCOS. We can continue to name a lot of the things that women are experiencing that we should have solves for by now. I mean,
Mm.
PMS, come on. We should have a solve for PMS by now. But we really don't, because there's just not the kind of money put into women's health that are put into men's health. So I think we will, in our life, you and I, in our lifetime, because research and studies take years, right? A good research and then a solution is 17 years. So in our lifetime, I think we are going to see, and we are going to make a lot of the right correlations between what is happening with the depletion of estrogen, testosterone, thyroid, also high levels of cortisol and progesterone decrease. We're going to now see how that really plays out on a woman's body.
Yeah, there's still so little we know. And so I really hope this documentary really helps spearhead some change, some awareness,
Yeah.
especially at the policy level, at the educational level. I know the documentary includes insights from renowned doctors and menopause experts, menopause expert, author, and advocates like Dr. Mary Claire Haver, Dr. Sharon Malone, the neuroscientist, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who's
Yeah.
right now researching women's brains and menopause, and
Yes.
I'm sure a whole host of other experts. Given you've been in this menopause space for some time, I'm curious, what were some of the most surprising or impactful things you learned from these experts during the making of the film?
That's an interesting question. Actually, there were two segments. One was, you mentioned Lisa Mosconi. It was her segment where she talked about perimenopause and the brain on perimenopause. So she shows in the film what the brain looks like, right? How the woman's brain before perimenopause, everything's fired up, like all red, fired up, active, going, da da da. Now she's in perimenopause, and the red is so fainted, the active is so fainted. Then she's now menopause and going into post. And now some of her brain comes back. And she shows it how it happens differently for women. So some women come on the other side of that, and they actually have the brain of their 20-year-old mind.
Oh, wow, really?
Some women come back and they're just where they were pre-menopause, come back equal. And then there is a percentage of women who their brains never restored.
Hmm.
Those are the women on the path to dementia and Alzheimer's. And that was fascinating to actually see that there really is something that happens. We all, we talk about our brain. You and I were just laughing about the brain fog tea.
Mhm.
We talk about it. It is a real thing. It really is something that does, these decreases really do impact the brain. But we don't really know enough about what happens and why and what we can do to not sort of have that mental disruption. And then the other doctor, or the insight, was from Dr. Kelly Casperson when she talked about testosterone use for women. So we know that when men, they have their low libido, they are given testosterone shots, testosterone gels that they put on their bodies. But women cannot be prescribed testosterone. They can only be prescribed testosterone if they're trying to do a sex change. And I was like, what in the world? And testosterone, knowing that we don't have as much generally as testosterone as men, obviously, but we have testosterone and our levels drop, which means our libido drops, right? So she talked about how even if you were to get a prescription, that because there's no prescription really for women for this, that the dose for a man is not the dose for a woman. Like the dose for a woman is 10% of the dose of a man. And she
Mhm.
shows us a packet. This is like a packet of what men get. And it's just a packet. So the man, they would put all that on him. But a woman's supposed to put 10%. She opens this up and shows you, what is 10% of this? How do I figure out what 10% of this that I'm supposed to use? And I just thought that just was still back to how we don't have enough research on this for women, but also how patriarchy plays itself into women's sexual health, even in this stage in their life, right? So this has nothing to do with reproduction. This is about me being able to have a sexual well-being experience as a woman, whether I have a partner or not have a partner, right? And I thought those two pieces in the film were the most fascinating reveals to me.
I love that you touched on those two aspects, the role of estrogen in the brain, the role of testosterone, because they're very hot topics right now. They're controversial topics. There are experts who believe that estrogen and testosterone do have a role to play in women's brains. And well, it has been proven to play a role in women's libido, but testosterone is being said that has testosterone also can play a role in women's muscle mass
Yeah.
and also in women's brains. But there's still a lot of controversy. And because of what you say, there's not enough research around this. But do you think the film answers any of these questions or sort of dispels some of these controversies or myths around these two topics?
I think it does a little bit. One of the things that Dr. Moscone talks about is that an OBGYN is not a neuroscientist. They have not studied the brain. There is a lot of the brain that they actually do not know. And so that we've got to not believe that our OB is the end all for us, even as we go through perimenopause. And I thought that was fascinating. I mean, she sort of, kind of dropped the mic on that. There's no real answer to that. There's not like a lot of neuroscientists that you can go, or neuroscientists who specialize in the perimenopausal brain. But it totally made sense when you think about that an OB/GYN's real study is the study of the female anatomy to deliver a baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is the reason why so many OB/GYNs do not know how to provide management and treatment of menopause for women when they go and see them. More and more of them are beginning to, but most of them have been trained to you. If you became an OB, it's because you wanted to deliver babies, period, end of story. Not that you wanted to deal with older women as they go through menopause. Nobody becomes an OB to do that. They don't. It's something that happens later on. Typically, it happens as the doctor is aging herself or himself, their patients are aging. So they end up, oh, I'm 25 years into my practice. Now my patients who I've been have delivered their children and now seeing me for perimenopause. And that is either where the physician decides, I'm going to learn more. I'm going to go get educated on this so I can help these patients. Or they say, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't really do that. I just still do babies. Right. And
Mm.
they, will send them off to someone else, refer them out.
I know one of the film's focal points is how the health system inadequately prepares physicians to address menopause. And your case in point gynecologist. What reforms do you hope this documentary will inspire within the medical community?
In California, there's a bill that I've been involved in called AB 2270. This is a bill that recommends physicians who have a patient population with 25% of their patient population is over the age of 40, that they take a menopause physical and mental health training course, right? So it's just a recommendation, so not a mandate. I was hoping the bill would have more of a mandate, but it's a beginning. It's a first step. It'd be the first bill. Our governor hopefully will sign it this week or next week. And it'd be the first bill of its kind. And then each state can go and create their own bill. And then someone can put teeth on it. Someone can go back to bills like this and say, we're going to mandate Bill AB 2270 that all physicians who have patient population where 25% of it is over the age of 40 should be required to take a menopause course of study, right? That's just one sort of area of reform. And that forces the physicians, current practicing physicians, and most women, let's be clear, most women do not go to OBGYNs. There are not enough OBGYNs in the country for all women to go to an OB. Most women go to their general practitioner. Most general practitioners are doing pap smears and breast exams. So those are the doctors that definitely need to have this training as a mandate because they're not OBGYNs who would have some sense of hormonal changes and hormonal fluctuations. A lot of times when women show up to a general practitioner with these symptoms, they really are challenged. The physician is really challenged to help them. So, there's other bills that are coming out of the federal government. Nothing has passed yet, but coming out of the federal government to make sure insurers cover HRT, put more research specifically into the perimenopause, menopause research fund. There is a bill that actually passed out of Louisiana, and Louisiana is nowhere a progressive state by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a bill that passed, signed by the governor, that requires insurers in the state of Louisiana to provide HRT and to have coverage of HRT as well as for Medicaid, so the government aid for the state to cover HRT. It's a very progressive bill. So we have these little wins, right? Like, okay, so how do we now take this to each state and get a win for each state so that state by state by state by state by state until the federal government can get something passed, women are covered.
I sit on the board of Let's Talk Menopause, a national nonprofit which advocates to Congress certain bills. I'm not sure if they've lobbied for AB 2270, but I know that women who view the film can have a voice in this, right? And I think that's the power of your storytelling, the power of this film, that it will not only rally doctors to go get their training, but also rally women, listeners, partners, anyone who loves a woman to go and write to their congressperson to pass several of these bills that are before Congress, because we can have a say in this and how menopause moves forward. So thank you so much for all your work around that. I didn't know about AB 2270, so I think wow, I know I've heard doctors say that they had 1 hour of menopause education when they were in medical school. So to mandate them to have much more than that and to be equipped to help menopausal women is definitely a huge win. Let's move on to menopause in the workplace. I know it's a significant issue that's touched on in the film, especially with nearly half of the female workforce being over the age of 45. How can employers better support women during this transition, according to the experts featured in the film?
What I have found is first it has to start off with the leadership inside the organization, educating themselves first, getting them to understand like just the basics. What is perimenopause? What is menopause? Oh, wow, this impacts a lot of women. Oh, all women are going to go through menopause, right? Not necessarily all women are going to have perimenopausal symptoms. They will have some kind of symptoms, but it may not be a disruptor to their life. But for them to understand, then they can go and look at their company and look at some simple things like our insurance that we pay for our employees. Does it cover replacement therapy or HRT? Does it cover that? And challenging the provider to make sure, or we're going to get another provider. That's like the first thing they can easily do so that when women do show up at their doctor with these symptoms, whether they're telling their employer or not, that they're covered, right? So I think that's like the first step they can do. I mean, and then I think is figuring out how does the company start to have a conversation in the workplace about menopause. And it can start off with some webinars and things like that. But then looking at, the next step would be, can you have as part of your employer affiliate program, can you have like a Geneve or, someone who women can call who are experts, who they know there are experts on the other side of that call who can help those women when in fact they have some questions. Because maybe they're in an area a work area where there aren't a lot of menopause specialists that they can physically go to. So can the company put that in place? Can the company put a policy in place where they recognize these women in the workplace and that they're making accommodations for them, right? Health accommodations with the insurance provider, with the telehealth, with regular conversations, celebrating World Menopause Day, maybe having conversations. I know we're introducing this sort of perimenopause month.
Mhm.
September used to always be menopause month in our country. And then the international folks just sort of, started to advance us in this topic. And this one day, this international day kind of popped up. But it wasn't that America had not been recognizing it. It just didn't have any amplification
Yeah,
behind what
momentum. Mhm.
what had been put in place. So I think those are some of the easy things, and all companies are different. If people are at work, are there bathrooms on every level? In the bathrooms, because women have, sporadic periods, do you have pads and tampons in there for those moments when the woman is on a 2-week period? Or when all of a sudden she didn't expect to be on a period and now she's on her period so that she doesn't have to go all the way home or be embarrassed at the workplace. For women who are having hot flashes, can I have a fan on my desk? Can we have an allowance for that? Can even the workplace provide the fan for me? Can we look at the temperature that is in the office? Is there some flexibility around the adjustment? If I work in an environment where I'm forced to wear a uniform, is this a comfortable uniform? Is it like made out of wool, which a lot of women get allergic to
Mhm.
wool as they go through perimenopause? It makes them super, super hot. Is there water available? Like if I'm having hot flashes a lot, I might need more cold water to drink to cool me down. Those are kind of the accommodations that workplaces can, look at doing. Is there a place where, like, when I get really fatigued, that I could actually just lie down and nobody looks at me a certain way for having to do that, right? Doesn't mean I'm not going to pop back up and go and work and make up the time that I did laying down, but is there an accommodation for me to just be able to do that, right?
Wow, such important points. And I know from speaking to women who are in the corporate world that the issue of promotions comes up, right? Am I going to get that pay raise? Am I going to get that promotion because I'm at this certain stage of life and I'm, having to take more time off because of that? Our allowance is going to be made for that. I think those are all such critical issues if we're going to keep talented women,
Yeah,
women who have value to share in the workplace, if we're going to keep them in the workplace for the
yeah.
long run. Let's move on to the following. I wanted just to get your own personal experience as a woman who has likely experienced or is experiencing menopause. How has producing the M Factor impacted your own personal understanding of this life stage or how you experience it right now?
For me, it further showed me how many many places that we have work to do, right? That in the healthcare we have so much work to do. Confidence with women and letting women express what's happening to them. We have work to do to be able to get women to talk about this and move from the suffrage that they have allowed themselves to continue to stay in. So it just said to me, like, gosh, how much work we really have to do, but also how exciting that we're actually going to have a film that actually highlights this so other people can see it. Because you made a statement before, and I always say this to all of us in this menopause bubble, that we're in a bubble which we have this crazy amount of knowledge, but it's a bubble,
Hmm.
right? The rest of the world outside that little bubble doesn't know anything, has no clue, still suffering, don't want to talk about it, right? From the women to the doctors, everywhere. So I think this is a good start. I think all of us can take this film and find ways of how they use it and utilize it. We're turning this film into a continuing medical education course. So for physicians who watch this film, they will get an AMA credit towards the renewal of their license. So all practicing doctors have to renew their license every 2 years. They have to have 40 hours of coursework, so CME coursework, in order to do that. So we're going to give them an hour towards their 40 hours when they watch this film. So we're trying to do our part across the country. I'm also working with medical schools to have this as part of their curriculum, to watch this film, and we'll have a little exam afterwards for the young people. And So there's a lot that we're trying to do with this film to cross it beyond just being on television and having access from a streaming standpoint, but to actually getting into these environments. And of course, we're encouraging women to have watch parties in their homes or to host a screening to get as many people to know about this issue and to understand what is really happening with women during this time.
What I love about you, Denise, is just that fire in your belly to amplify this conversation of menopause. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing. The film is set to premiere on PBS the day before World Menopause Day.
Yeah.
And there'll be, like you said, there'll be screenings hosted by different people. People can host a screening. Where can people go if they want to host a screening in their home or their local community center?
It's going to be on PBS. It comes out October 17th. PBS tends to rebroadcast a lot. So
Mhm.
they will rebroadcast this like a number of times. Like they may have it on the 17th, the 18th. They may have it on the Saturday. They may show it again in November. So every station in your local market has the ability to show it when they want. We gave them 4 times to show it. But also, they could go online at pbs.org and it will be streaming there as well. And if you're a member of PBS, kind of like how you're a member of Hulu or Netflix, then you also have access to watch it for an entire year.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the idea of having listening parties, really encouraging viewers, women to bring their communities together to view this not once, not 2 times, but 3 times, as many times as possible as needed to get this message across. What advice would you give to women who are just beginning their menopause journey and might feel isolated or unsupported?
There's a couple good places to go to. Electra Health has some videos that people can start looking at just to get a sense of, what's happening with their bodies. If they, want to reach out to a practitioner, from a telehealth standpoint, there's Geneve.
Genève, yes, I heard you mention them before. I wanted to just signpost them. They are a telehealth concierge service covered by insurance, right? I think
Yeah,
Aetna is
they're
covered by them.
slowly getting covered by insurance across the country. Yeah, if you have private insurance. So I think there you can go get some information.
Well,
Uh,
I mentioned Let's Talk Menopause, right? So
Let's
Let's Talk
Talk Menopause has
Menopause.
some good information. There's my thing that I do called Wise Pause.
Mhm.
We do every month, sometimes twice a month. We have a conversation that stretches from hair thinning and during this period, nutrition, fitness, sexual health, HRT 101, like understanding it. What the heck is bioidenticals? Really, helping women to be able to make choices, right? I think women need to hear everything so then they can make the choice for themselves. So they need to understand HRT. They need to understand bioidenticals. They need to understand nutraceuticals and then make the decision. I think I'm going to go HRT or I think I'm going to try natural first, right? But they should be able to have a knowledge base to then make a decision. We also teach them what should a doctor patient relationship look like as you go. And we're now starting to work on scripts because a lot of women find they go in, they got the 12 minutes with the doctor, and they walked out, they really didn't get anything solved. And so now we're helping women to go into these doctors with a script they can use, easy to memorize, so that they actually get what it is they need to get in that 12, 15 minutes that you have when you go see a physician.
And really advocating for themselves. Yeah, that's something that I really wholeheartedly support. We can advocate for ourselves when we're armed with the right knowledge and information.
But you do have to be careful. I mean, not everyone has the luxury of going to another doctor. You know what I'm saying? So if you go into a doctor all aggressive, and that's, because your economics doesn't allow you to go to another doctor or a doctor of choice, you've got to go to, if you're in an HMO, you just got to go stay within that type of system. How do you still get what you need without being aggressive, without trying to tell the doctor what to do, because all those things do not work in those kind of environments at all.
Yeah, they can backfire,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But also knowing that you can go and get second opinions, that you can, if you're able to say, not everything was covered in this appointment, I want to make another appointment, but
Yeah.
definitely going in with a list of things that you want to cover and making the doctor aware that that's what you want to talk about. And maybe the doctor can only address one thing right now.
Yeah.
At least a doctor knows and they can,
Yeah.
they're open to making another appointment
Yeah. Yeah.
with you.
So I think so I think every person, whether you're perimenopause or not, just in terms of your health, is to, before you go in, is to write down like exactly what is happening to you, right? When it happened, what happened, and very specifics. If you have a pain, be specific. Is it a dull pain or sharp pain? Be specific where it's at. I say sometimes put a marker on your body, right? Because a lot of times we go and that pain we might be nervous when we're in a doctor and all of a sudden the pain, I can't find the pain, right? Then you walk out, oh my God, the pain was right here, right? But I just got, so, as prepared as you can be, the better your solution is going to be from the physician, right? So a sharp pain and a dull pain is very different for the physician and what they're going to do as a protocol, right? Depending on what they believe that might be. So, as armed as you can be in details about what's going on, and you can't have 1,000 things. You can't walk in there and say, with your perimenopause, I'm having heart palpitations, I'm having painful sex, I'm having this, I'm having that. I think you got to go in with like, what is the biggest disruptor at this point? And that is the thing that you focus on. And maybe if you can toss in something else, this would be the next thing that I would want to share with my physician.
Great points. Those are great points. So tell us, Denise, how can listeners support the M Factor before and after it premieres?
So before it premieres is to share about the film, post about the film. We have all these graphics, and I'll give you information that you can share with your audience. So posting our social memes, gathering, maybe have some friends over and watch it together. Have a discussion. See if there's a doctor that you might be able to invite to watch the film along with you. Maybe participate in some of the virtual viewing parties that are going to happen. What else? I think those are everything. Tag us, the M Factor film, on your social. Let's, really turn this in. Our goal is to turn this into a movement. We haven't had that one thing where we can galvanize around that's national. And I think this film we can use to make it like a movement. Did you see the M Factor? You didn't see watch the M Factor, right? You could tell your doctor, watch the M Factor. You could tell your spouses, watch the M Factor. Your kids, watch the M Factor. Like in 1 hour, people can get a sense of understanding what is really happening to women. There isn't anything that does that right now.
And so making the M Factor a household name.
Making it a household name.
For our international audiences, is there the ability to watch the documentary?
It's interesting. We've had people reach out from South Africa, Australia, Brazil, New Zealand, the UK, obviously, Canada, all over Canada. So, what we're doing is kind of working with a lot of these groups. They are looking to host screenings. So, we're figuring out how we can do that in these sort of private portal ways. Because we do have a license with PBS, we can't, this can't end up on YouTube and all over the place.
Mhm.
So we are looking at ways in which those international groups are able to host screenings. So what we can do is once we have solidified their screening dates, we can post those on the mfactorfilm.com site.
Okay. So if someone is listening right now, because this is going to be aired before the premiere of M Factor, if someone's listening and they're, I have a lot of people in the UK or Mexico, if they want to find a way to see the film, should they contact you or the email on the website?
Yes. So
Okay.
yeah, we have an email on the website. It's just very simple. You go to the mfactorfilm.com. You'll see the bottom, there's the mfactorfilm@gmail.com. And we respond all day long. We're constantly getting people sending us information, inquiring about doing the screening, inquiring about what can they do international. So yeah, we
Okay.
have graphic toolkits on there too. So you go there, you can download any of the graphics, post them, use them. You're free to use them anyway. We give them sample kind of posting language. So we try to help people as much as possible amplify the message.
Wonderful. And we'll be doing that here on Pleasure in the Pause via the newsletter, via our blog, via the website, via our social media channels for sure. Before we say goodbye, Denise, I always love to ask my guests, because we're all about pleasure here and we want to incorporate more pleasure in the pause. What
Yes.
does pleasure mean to you?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked what does pleasure mean to me. I think pleasure puts a smile on my face. It puts an
Ah,
energy in my body, like it's soulful, right? It's energizing, right? It's spiritual, right? When you think of the word pleasure, we don't hear it as much. We tend to hear pleasure associated with sexual well-being. And yes, definitely there's pleasure in sexual well-being, but there's pleasure in a little baby running towards you, right? There's
mhm.
pleasure in walking out and you recognize it's a beautiful day, right? There's pleasure in that. So I try, every day to find an awe moment in my life. And, it's not hard. It could be me looking at a squirrel hopping along my back fence as I wake up. It could be when I end in my evening, I go outside and look and just gaze at the stars, right? It could be me looking at a really beautiful flower outside of my door. It could be me watching some of my neighbors just walk and laughing, talking as they go by and me waving at them, right? It can be anything. We can find awe and pleasure every single day in our life. I just so try to do that in my life. And that gives me the joy and it gives me the energy to do the things that, we've been talking about today.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. And it definitely shows. And I've been in your presence and I can definitely feel that energy. Thank you so much, Denise, for everything that you do to amplify the menopause conversation. I'm so excited about the premiere and release of the M Factor film. We're going to share it far and wide. And if
Thank you.
people want information, I know they can follow you.
Well, they can follow they can follow me on Denise L. Pines.
Hmm.
That's my, personal thing. They can follow the film at the M Factor Film. We've got a lot of activity going on there, and we're going to continue. We're going to start posting people's screenings, people's stories about their screenings. So it's going to be very active and very robust, pretty active and robust right now, but we want to sort of continue this. Our goal is to have like a full year of engagement.
Wonderful. So join the movement, follow
Join the movement.
join the M Factor film, follow them on Instagram. I know they're on LinkedIn. LinkedIn was the other social media channel.
Yes,
I know
LinkedIn.
you're on there. I've been seeing it everywhere on LinkedIn, which is wonderful. Facebook, we need to really get the message out and we're going to help you do that. Thank you
Okay,
so much,
thank you. Thank
Denise, for your work and for your presence. I enjoyed this conversation.
you. Mwah. Thank you. Thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pleasure in the Pause. Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Hit the share episode button and send it to a friend or post it on your Instagram stories and tag me, Gabriella Espinosa. And if you really love this podcast, please leave a rating or review, as this helps the show get in front of new listeners. Finally, if you would like to access even more pleasure and stay in touch, sign up for my free pleasure upgrade bundle of powerful mind-body practices by going to pleasureinthepause.com. Remember, your pleasure matters.